Hello, my name is Matthew Baez, and today we're going to be going over the Supreme Court case Marbury versus Madison. So, Marbury versus Madison uh, involved this guy, William Marbury. This is James Madison, current Secretary of State, and John Marshall, who is the Chief Justice at the time. Now, what happened was uh, William Marbury was appointed to be a judge, the Justice of District of Columbia. And in order for him to become a judge, he needed to have his commission papers delivered by the Secretary of State, right? However, they were different politically, and Madison simply refused to deliver the papers. Marbury then went to the Supreme Court and said, hey, under a section of the Judicial Act of 1789, you can issue a writ to force Madison to deliver those papers and make me a judge. Now, during the course of this, John Marshall and the other justices decided that they couldn't do what Marbury wanted him to because they did not have the constitutional power to do what the Judiciary Act of 1789 allowed them to do, which means they decided that the Judiciary Act of 1789, parts of it, just the specific part that they were discussing, was unconstitutional by Act 3, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution. Now, what this means is that now it's important to pay attention to exactly what happened here. The Supreme Court ruled that a law was not constitutional, right? And while it did have to do specifically with the Supreme Court, the basis of it is it had to do with them saying, oh, we don't have the power to do that. Ironically, what this did was give them more power, the most power out of possibly any branch in government, or the best access to, because they have the best access for changing and influencing law directly. Instead of having hundreds of congressmen and women, you just have 9 justices. Now we have 9. Their number has varied from as low as 6 to 14, I believe. So what this does is the Supreme Court decides that a law is unconstitutional, that they can't follow it, and in so doing establishes the process that we now know today as judicial review, which we'll talk about in the coming slides. So why is judicial review so important? What is so important about the Supreme Court saying that a law is unconstitutional? Well, because it gives the Supreme Court the ability to rescind older laws, as old as they are. It could have been ratified that year, could have been ratified 50 years ago. But if a case comes forward that cites that law, whether it's a state law, a federal law, whatever it happens to be, the Supreme Court, if they decide that that law is unconstitutional, that it is impacting somebody's constitutional rights, they will decide that that law does not apply. And in so doing, they could also affirm existing laws, right? If somebody brings a Supreme Court case, but their appeal is denied, then they reaffirm the existing law is constitutional, right? It's a reinforcement. It's the rebar in the concrete. Pardon me. But what this does is it creates new laws called case laws, and also gives us new interpretations for how we should legally interpret the Constitution. And sort of in a way, it's similar to the 14th Amendment in that Marbury versus Madison is, in that while any of us may consider like the 14th Amendment, we may consider other amendments like the first, the second, and particularly 4th and 5th. These are the ones that I think most people are familiar with. That the 14th Amendment establishes that all these amendments, the 9th, 10th, 20th, all of them, apply to every single person born and naturalized in the United States. It was done so to give freed slaves full rights as citizens, right? They're the rights. Everyone is a citizen and have the rights granted to them. Just as So the 14th Amendment kind of is, as was mentioned in one of our videos, kind of is the most important amendment, even though a lot of people really like these ones, and they are essential to human rights. The 14th Amendment is what says that everybody gets them. Just like while you may see some of these court cases, particularly this one probably, as one of the most important court cases, it sort of doesn't hold a candle to Marbury versus Madison, because Marbury versus Madison is the reason why all these ones are so important. And these are just some cases to consider, which go over the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, and segregation. And this one is also important. Brown v. Board is important because it shows that Brown v. Board actually overruled Plessy v. Ferguson, which ruled that segregation, this is where separate but equal comes in, segregation is constitutional. Brown v. Board reversed that decision. Okay? So this also established that not only can the Supreme Court rescind old laws, but they can also reverse older decisions. Brandenburg v. Ohio is very important, especially in the current circumstances, because it gives very specific guidelines on what exactly a call to violence and unprotected speech is, right? We see this happening with what happened in the Capitol. People want to punish former President Trump for inciting. However, under Brandenburg v. Ohio, that's unconstitutional because it doesn't follow the three or four criteria, depending on how you split them up, established there. Heller versus DC is also very important. This is actually a recent case that not a lot of people know about, yet is essential for our rights, especially with the Second Amendment. Heller versus DC establishes that, as a rule, the Second Amendment is explicitly for self-defense, right? Not just against the government, not just against another government, powers foreign and domestic, but is explicitly for you as an individual, your self-defense. So these are some three court cases that I think are really essential. Brown v. Board is a little bit more significant in terms of legally, because it overturned not just laws, but other Supreme Court decisions. And what's really important here is the judicial review is really fundamental to the Constitution. Now, the Constitution was deliberately written to be sort of vague. Not vague, but non-specific, which is a synonym for vague. I'm sorry. But they gave, the Founding Fathers gave us the ability to create amendments to the Constitution. And they did 10 right off the bat, you know. So they accepted that the Constitution is not the be-all, end-all. It just is a framework for what is and what should be America. They understood and they hoped that the United States would last so far into the future that they couldn't possibly predict. And as further amendments and Marbury versus Madison prove, they couldn't even predict 30 years into the future, right? Let alone 200, let alone 300, and even more beyond. So judicial review, because technology and circumstances exist now that were impossible to predict. The internet has unprecedentedly changed the way we communicate. How does that affect the First Amendment? What is still valid about the First Amendment? It turns out everything, but we have cities bigger than ever could have possibly been imagined. Around the late 1700s, the largest city was Beijing, with a population of about 1 million. The largest city in history was Rome, who had 1.5 to 2 million, depending, but that's a very, very large city geographically as well. In the US, the largest city was New York, with 30,000 people. Now New York has close to 10 million. It's completely impossible for them to have predicted what sort of pressures this amount of people could cause on economics, crime, the interaction between police and the United States, the police and the public, the government, how the government interacts with the public. Completely impossible to predict. Amendments and the Supreme Court allow laws to change and adapt for modern times based on modern problems, just like the Ciarollo case. In California's v. Serralo, the police got a plane, flew over Mr. Serralo's home, discovered he was growing marijuana in the backyard after they suspected it, and the Supreme Court ruled that this is constitutional because it is from a publicly viewable airspace, and any person flying over could see that. The police weren't special in gaining that information. Completely impossible for the founding fathers to predict reliable and common flying machines. So the Supreme Court allows things like this to be changed and to be adapted, to be upheld, and to be confirmed. So judicial review is still probably the most influential piece of uh, legislature, case law. It's the most important Supreme Court case, certainly, in our government, not only because of the impact it has on the Supreme Court, but the impacts the Supreme Court has on the government as a whole. It allows there to be an impartial party, because remember, the reason why the Supreme Court justices do not have term limits and are not voted on is so that they are not beholden to political intrigue. They are supposed to be as impartial constitutional scholars as possible. Of course, they're still human beings, and this isn't always the case. Everybody has biases. But what this does is, what it should be for a justice is that is a different interpretation of the Constitution, and they're simply trying to find the one that best fits both the Constitution and the situations that we find ourselves in today. So judicial review allows them to do that, and it allows them unprecedented power and the ability to have an actual correct interpretation of the Constitution. All right, that's it for me. Thank you very much. We went on a little bit long, but there we go. That's Marbury versus Madison. Thank you.